They handed me a cupcake and a termination letter under a balloon arch. No warning, no meeting, not even a goodbye. Just, your services are no longer needed. And the best part? My sister Sophia, the golden girl of our family, was the one holding the mic. Hi, I'm Lauren Chen. I spent 12 years building our family company from the ground up. But the moment I became inconvenient, they erased me like I'd never existed. They thought I'd walk away quietly. But one sentence changed everything and turned their celebration into chaos. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I parked where I always did, third spot from the loading dock. Routine had a comfort to it, even when my stomach was turning. I balanced my iced coffee in one hand and the binder of financial notes in the other. It was Monday, quarterly operations review. I had called this meeting myself, added the Outlook invites, even adjusted for the time zone difference when Sophia forgot. The marble floors inside Titan's lobby reflected the sun just enough to make me squint. I nodded to the receptionist, but she offered only a brief, uneasy smile before looking away. Something about the silence behind her desk made the whole space feel colder than usual. The conference room doors were already ajar. I pushed them open with my shoulder, expecting to see the usual whiteboard, maybe a projector left on standby. Instead, I saw balloons, gold and white. A full arch over the entryway like a wedding or worse, a coronation. Lilies, too, my mother's favorite. The scent clung to the air, too heavy, too intentional. On the side table, someone had arranged cupcakes in neat little towers, all frosted with a shade of pink that clashed with the Titan logo behind them. My heels clicked once on the tile before the room turned toward me. Everyone was seated already, board members, department heads, even legal counsel. No one was taking notes. No one had a laptop open. My father stood at the head of the table. "Lauren," he said, voice practiced, smooth. "So glad you could join us." Glad I could join? I scheduled this meeting. Before I could respond, he continued. Today marks a pivotal transition in Titan's legacy. We are proud to announce a new chapter of leadership. Sophia will be taking over as CEO effective immediately. Applause erupted. I didn't clap. My hands stayed at my sides, stiff and cold. Across the table, Sophia smiled like she'd rehearsed the moment in a mirror. She wore a cream suit that didn't wrinkle, not even at the elbow. Her lipstick was the same shade as the cupcakes. No one had told me, not even a whisper. "I believe it's time to streamline our leadership," she said, addressing the board with glossy conviction. "Titan is ready for a fresh era, focused, unified." Melissa, from HR, rose from her chair and walked toward me with a manila folder. My name was typed neatly on the tab. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew. "Your services are no longer needed," she said without apology. "We've processed the standard package." I scanned the room. My mother avoided eye contact, fixing her gaze on a bouquet of lilies as if they held better answers. My father cleared his throat and sat down. No one else moved. Sophia stepped closer, her voice lowered just enough that only I could hear. "This isn't personal, Lauren. You've outlived your role." That word, outlived, echoed in my mind. I was the one who had pulled Titan through its worst quarter in 2019. I was the one who stayed in Houston during the winter freeze while Sophia posted ski selfies from Breckenridge. I was the one who answered client calls on Christmas Day, but I had outlived my role. I tucked the folder under my arm and turned without a word. My badge didn't register at the elevator. Melissa must have deactivated it already. A junior assistant I had mentored, Casey, maybe 2 years out of college, walked past carrying a box. My name was taped on the side. Inside, I saw the ceramic mug that read, "Boss Lady in Training," a photo of me and Mom from Titan's first gala, and the walnut pen Dad had given me the day we opened our second office. No one followed me to the parking lot. The sun was too bright, the air too still. I unlocked my car, slid into the seat, and placed the folder on the passenger side. My fingers curled around the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Back home, the hallway smelled like lavender and old dust. I set the box down on the kitchen table. The ticking of the wall clock felt louder than it should have. I lifted the lid, started unpacking without really seeing. One by one. The mug, the pen, the framed photo. But when I pulled back a layer of bubble wrap, something stopped me. Tucked beneath the last flap of cardboard was a sealed envelope. My name was written across it in careful handwriting. No return address, no memo slip, nothing else. It hadn't been in the original contents. I stared at it, heart steady but breath uneven. The flap wasn't torn or curled, like it hadn't been opened. It was waiting, quiet and deliberate. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I leaned against the counter, let the hum of the refrigerator fill the room, and let the silence settle around me like dust in the sunlight. Something was wrong, but something else might be about to shift. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like it had always belonged there. Its edges were too crisp to be forgotten, too deliberate to be a mistake. I stared at my name written in that neat, slanted handwriting. No return address, no corporate logo, just me. The box it came in still sat beside the sink, half unpacked. The smell of stale office carpet clung to the papers, mixing awkwardly with the bitter steam of the coffee I'd reheated twice and still hadn't touched. I slid a knife under the flap and peeled it open. The paper was heavier than I expected, thick, off-white and embossed with the letterhead of our company's former legal counsel. My breath caught before I even reached the middle of the first page. I skimmed the lines, my eyes landing on the date, March 2018, 4 years ago. It was a notarized agreement, a 10% non-dilutable voting stake in Titan Logistics, active unless I resigned in writing. My signature curled in blue ink across the bottom. Below mine, another, Sophia Chen. My mind began to stretch back. The couch, a Thursday night, the smell of red wine and panic. Sophia had shown up at my apartment in tears, breath shallow, shaking. "They're going to pull out," she had whispered, pacing in front of my fireplace. "If we miss this payment, we lose our biggest account. I've called everyone." Everyone, meaning me. I had canceled my weekend trip, booked a rental, and driven 3 hours to Austin to meet a lawyer Sophia said she trusted. We sat in his narrow office with plastic blinds and a leaky Keurig, reviewing documents over gas station coffee and stale biscotti. She kept wringing her hands, thanking me between sniffles. "You're the only one who understands," she had said. "I'll never forget this. I mean it." Apparently, she had. I pulled the rest of the envelope's contents onto the table and scanned the pages again. Legal terms, references to wire transfers, a scanned bank receipt for $250,000 from my personal account. I pressed my fingers to the ink like it could still carry warmth. Then I stood, walked into the living room, and pulled out the drawer where I kept old files. The cabinet creaked open. Inside, labeled folders, receipts, and a few stray USB drives in mismatched plastic sleeves. My heart beat harder than it needed to. In the back corner, tucked between old tax forms and a user manual for a printer I no longer owned, was a folder marked 2019, Payroll and Approvals. I slid it out and flipped through. There it was, a USB drive taped to the inside flap with masking tape. Next to it, a coffee-stained copy of a payroll projection sheet, my handwriting in the margins. I brought the USB to my laptop, plugged it in, and waited. The files were all still there. Payroll forecasts, vendor communications, meeting notes. One audio file caught my eye, titled April 17th, Voice Memo S. I clicked it. Sophia's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "I don't know how to thank you. If I ever forget this, I don't deserve to be in charge of anything, let alone this family." I let it play through once, then again. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I didn't cry, not this time. I'd already spent too many years apologizing to silence, hoping it would forgive me for being the one who kept things going while others got the credit. I clicked back to my desktop and opened a new folder. I named it Ownership. Inside it, I began to drag everything. Scanned documents, the memo, financials, tax forms. I created 2 more, bylaws and receipts. Everything I had once archived out of loyalty, I now pulled out with surgical precision. Near the top corner of my desk sat a pen, walnut wood, heavy in the hand. Dad had given it to me the day we cut the ribbon on our second distribution center. "You're the future," he had said then. "Write like it matters." I picked it up and held it for a long time. Funny how quiet it got when things started making sense. My laptop buzzed, a new email, subject line, "Still owe you coffee, tea." Trina. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She'd always been sharper than the rest, worked in media now, maybe still freelanced for the Chronicle. We weren't close anymore, not really, but the subject line made me pause. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back, stared at the folders glowing on my desktop, and let my mind circle the idea that had been creeping in ever since I saw the balloons. They didn't just remove me, they erased me, and they thought I'd forgotten the ink had dried. Another ping. A second email, this one different. Subject: I don't agree with what they did to you. We need to talk. Javier Clark. I stared at the screen. I hadn't thought of Javier in months. Titan's accountant. Quiet, never caused ripples. Until now. Something in my chest shifted. Not anger, not relief. Resolve. I parked a block away from his apartment building, even though the street out front had plenty of space. Old habits. I'd always preferred a slow approach to meetings like these. Enough time to watch a door, read the lights behind a window, listen for the shape of silence. Javier lived in a 2-story brick complex wedged between a yoga studio and a dry cleaner that hadn't updated its signage since the late 90s. The front steps groaned under my heels as I climbed. When the door opened, the scent of reheated noodles and worn carpet hit me first. It wasn't unpleasant, just real. "Hey," he said, holding the door open with one shoulder. "Come in, it's not much." "It's fine," I replied, stepping past him. The space was cramped, but tidy in a way that suggested someone who liked order but hadn't had the time to keep up. Jazz played low from an old speaker in the corner. On a small fold-out table near the window, a laptop sat open beside 3 USB drives and a thick stack of printed ledgers. I caught a glimpse of my name highlighted in orange. "You said you had something," I said, keeping my voice even. He nodded, motioned to the chair opposite his. "They told me to wipe your access 6 days before the vote." I didn't respond. Not just emails or file permissions. They wanted the records themselves gone. Shareholder logs, voting rights, like you never existed. Like you'd been a placeholder we forgot to replace sooner. He clicked open a folder on his laptop labeled Not Forgotten. The first file was a transcript of an internal call. The timestamp read March 28th, 2022, 3 days before the board announcement. He pressed play. Sophia's voice clear and cutting. "She was never meant to last here. She's dead weight, an emotional liability." My breath stayed steady, but I could feel something settle in my chest, like ice finding the corners of a glass. Javier glanced at me but didn't pause. Next file. My mother this time, her tone careful, almost maternal. "She's family, yes, but we need someone more presentable, reliable. The firm needs a cleaner face." Presentable. The word sliced deeper than I expected. I said nothing. I didn't flinch. Javier reached for a printed spreadsheet and slid it across the table. "This is the admin record for stakeholder status. Notice anything?" I scanned the lines. My name wasn't there. He flipped to the next page, an older copy dated a month prior. My name sat at the top next to a 10% vote tag. "They asked me to replace the file," he said, quietly. "Just update the digital and delete the local copy. No backups, no questions." "But you kept them." I said, more statement than question. He nodded, eyes tired. Because I knew what we were doing was wrong, and I figured someday you'd come looking. I picked up the sheet, ran my fingers across the old toner. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Just done pretending. I opened my bag and pulled out my laptop, powering it on while the rain outside tapped gently against the window. I don't need you to defend me, I said softly. I have facts. He didn't argue. I opened a blank folder on my desktop, paused for a moment, then typed a single word in all caps, Phoenix. Not because I wanted to rise from the ashes, because I was finally ready to set fire to the lies and stand in the smoke. I dragged over the ownership documents, the audio files, the scanned ledgers. Each click was slow, deliberate. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. Javier slid a final folder across the table. Inside, a timeline, emails, Slack logs, approvals stripped in my name, digital fingerprints and plenty of them. They wanted this gone, he said, but I couldn't. I stayed quiet because I thought they'd fix it once it was done. But then I watched your badge stop working. He looked down at his hands. They made me part of the deletion. You kept something, I said. That's more than most. Outside, the rain had picked up. I heard it rushing down the gutter like a clock I hadn't listened to in years, time moving forward whether I was ready or not. My hand reached instinctively for the walnut pen in my coat pocket. I didn't write anything, just held it. Mom once said, "We need someone more polished at the front." I used to think she meant clothes, posture, image, but she meant me. She meant she didn't want me there at all. Javier stood, walked to the window, and closed the blinds halfway. The room dimmed. The jazz kept playing. I closed my laptop and zipped it back into my bag. Stood. They think I'm gone, I whispered, more to the room than to him. Then, louder, clearer, with steel where there had been silence, let's remind them I remember everything. I arrived just late enough to make an entrance, but early enough to see her name printed in gold foil at the top of the donor board, Sophia Chen, chairwoman. It hung above the reception table like a coronation banner. The valet gave me a quick glance, maybe trying to place me. I wasn't on the original guest list, but I'd learned that invitations were optional when your presence was legal. Inside, the ballroom shimmered under warm crystal chandeliers. The scent of champagne and expensive perfume hovered in the air. Guests leaned into conversation over linen-covered tables, clinking flutes and laughing too easily. The jazz trio in the corner was playing something light, unintrusive, music designed to stay out of the way. I moved along the back wall, unnoticed at first. My charcoal blazer blended with the muted tones of the event staff. But as I crossed behind the last row of chairs, a few heads turned. Whispers rippled. Some recognized me. Most didn't. At the center of it all stood Sophia. She was radiant, dressed in a pale blue gown that photographed well under chandelier light. Her hair was swept into a smooth chignon, and her voice floated confidently through the microphone. She spoke of legacy, of trust, of vision. This foundation, she said, represents more than just structure. It represents continuity, the ability to carry forward the values that shaped us, with grace. The crowd murmured approval. Margaret, seated near the front, smiled without blinking. Vincent nodded, arms crossed lightly, as if the moment were inevitable. I waited. Sophia reached the peak of her speech, hands poised like a conductor. And some of us, she continued with a glance toward the crowd, understand when it's time to lead and when it's time to let go. That was my cue. I stepped into the side aisle, walked steadily past the tables of flutes and floral arrangements, and approached the long table where the event's chairperson sat, reviewing papers between sips of mineral water. I didn't say a word, just placed a sealed envelope, heavy stock, legally notarized, on the table in front of her. She looked up, startled. I gave a polite nod, then turned and walked to the back of the room. She opened it. Her expression changed by degrees, confusion first, then concern. She whispered something to the man beside her, who leaned in, read the first few lines, then called over an assistant. There was a pause in the program. The jazz trio kept playing, but quieter now, like even they were listening. Then into the microphone, the chairperson's voice rang out, more formal than before. "We need to pause briefly for legal review of a submitted document. All pending decisions will be held until clarification is received." The room didn't gasp. It shifted. Sophia froze, one hand still hovering mid-gesture. Her smile stayed in place for a breath too long before she lowered the microphone. Her eyes scanned the table, then the crowd, then finally settled on me, near the back. She stepped off the stage. I watched her cross the room, poised but sharper now. Her heels clicked faster, her smile more mechanical with every step. I didn't move. She reached the chairperson, leaned in, voice low. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her jaw tighten. The man beside her raised his hand slightly, defensive. Then came the sentence I had waited months to hear. "Her authority's been revoked, legally, as of this morning." Sophia blinked, lips parted, searching for a response that wouldn't come. Around her, the donors began shifting in their seats, not unkindly, just curiously. The sound wasn't outrage. It was something quieter, heavier. Doubt. She turned slightly, catching sight of Margaret, but our mother offered no lifeline. Just that same tight smile she reserved for holiday cards and professional headshots. For a long moment, Sophia stood still. Her fingers twitched at her side, like she might reach for the microphone again, but didn't. I walked toward the exit, leaving the chatter behind me. The ballroom hadn't erupted. No one screamed. There was no scene. Just a shift, the kind that rewrites momentum. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. Early spring in Houston had a way of pretending to be fall for a night or two, just to confuse you. I reached for my phone. It buzzed before I could unlock it. A text from Trina. 6 a.m. tomorrow. Your story goes live. I looked out over the quiet street, the valet standing stiffly near a lineup of cars. Inside, behind tall windows, people were still sipping champagne. Sophia was probably trying to find someone to spin the interruption, but spin couldn't undo notarized truth. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket, exhaled through my nose, and walked down the sidewalk. The heels of my boots struck the pavement with the kind of rhythm that says, "I didn't crash your party. I simply reclaimed my place." The article dropped just after dawn. Trina had timed it perfectly. Not for headlines, not for chaos, but for clarity. By 6:03 a.m., my inbox had already begun to buzz. The title sat in bold letters across my screen. The Silent Founder, What Really Happened Inside Titan Logistics. The piece was clean, deliberate. It started with the origin story, 2 sisters and a family dream, then moved into the years I'd spent building the bones beneath Sophia's spotlight. There were side-by-side screenshots of incorporation papers, my name next to our father's, embedded voice clips, contracts, payroll logs, a memo from Sophia, dated and signed, thanking me for wiring funds to save the company. It was truth, but arranged with precision. By 7 o'clock, the messages began flooding in. "I interned at Titan in 2018. I always wondered why you vanished. I worked for your father's firm. Your name was everywhere in the early days. This explains so much. Thank you for standing up, even quietly." I didn't reply to them. Not yet. I just let them come in waves while the daylight began to warm the edges of the apartment. I sat at the kitchen island, phone face down beside the coffee I hadn't touched, staring at the ledger I'd kept wrapped in floral fabric and hidden in a drawer for years. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was weight. A notification pinged across my laptop. Legal filing. Sophia's lawyers had moved fast, too fast. A cease and desist, coupled with a defamation claim, addressed to both me and Trina. Attached were PDFs meant to bolster their stance. Financials, project attributions, committee rosters, all supposedly authentic. I scanned them slowly, already knowing what I was looking for. It didn't take long. On page 6 of one attachment sat a scanned copy of the 2019 Bridge Grant proposal. It bore my signature, neat, slanted, elegant. Only, it wasn't mine, not even close. She'd copied the shape, but not the rhythm. The loop of the G was off, and she didn't know I always left a small space between my first and last name when signing anything official. It was a forgery, one she'd now attached to a legal complaint. At 9:30, I was sitting across from Mr. Lang in a narrow conference room that smelled like citrus cleaner and dry ink. He flipped slowly through the documents I'd brought, originals, scans, backups, the floral-wrapped ledger, the printout of Sophia's signature from the complaint. "She really signed it as you," he said, more amused than surprised. "And this was submitted to the court? This morning." He leaned back, tapped the forged page, then the original I'd handed him moments earlier. "That's not you," he said, matter of fact. "And it never was," I replied. He paused, reading my expression. I wasn't angry anymore, not even bitter. I had passed that threshold somewhere between the cupcakes and the boardroom silence. Now it was something else. Recognition. "She didn't just take credit," I said, unfolding the floral cloth carefully. "She rewrote the story." Lang turned quiet but focused. He placed both signatures side by side and began highlighting the discrepancies with a yellow marker. "We're not just defending anymore," he said. "We're pressing charges." A silence passed between us, not empty, but charged, like something waiting to be named. My phone buzzed again. A name flashed across the screen that made my breath catch. Ethan. I stepped into the hallway before answering. "Still early where you are," I said. His voice was soft but steady. "I read the article." I figured. "You want to talk about it?" I hesitated. "Not yet." "Well," he said, "whenever you're ready. Your name still goes on the door. That offer hasn't changed." I didn't answer right away, just stared out the narrow window overlooking the city. Houston looked still from up here. Quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before thunder. Trina had once told me, truth moves slow, but when it hits, it lands like thunder. She was right. Back inside the conference room, Lang was already prepping the paperwork. He slid a form across the table toward me. "Filing for fraud, forgery, and perjury," he said, clicking his pen. "Do you want this in civil court only, or are we escalating to criminal?" I thought about that for a long moment. "I'm not here to punish her," I said. "I'm here to make sure the truth doesn't disappear." He gave a slow nod, understanding more than I said. We spent the next hour cataloging evidence. Metadata timestamps, email threads, call logs, even a set of Slack messages Javier had forwarded that morning. Every line added weight, not to crush her, but to steady me. At noon, I stepped out into the sunlight, blinking as my eyes adjusted. The warmth on my skin felt unfamiliar but welcome. My blazer held the scent of paper and old ink, but it didn't feel heavy. Back home, I took the original ledger and slid it back into its fabric wrap. Not to hide it, but to protect it. Some stories are fragile until they're believed. I checked my inbox one last time before closing the laptop. No new threats, no new lies, just a headline still trending. The Silent Founder, What Legacy Really Means. The courtroom was smaller than it looked on TV. No mahogany grandeur, no echoing gavels, just padded chairs, neutral walls, and a judge who spoke like someone reading instructions he'd memorized decades ago. But the words landed anyway. The court finds sufficient evidence of signature forgery, with damages substantiated. The defendant's authority was revoked in accordance with company bylaws. Financial penalties are awarded to the plaintiff. Sophia didn't speak. She didn't cry, didn't protest. She just sat there, her jaw locked, blinking like someone still waiting for a different ending. The moment held no triumph, no crescendo of applause or gasp of justice. It was quiet, and that was enough. Outside, the press waited. Microphones rose like thorns from the curb. Cameras clicked as I stepped down the stone stairs. I kept walking. I didn't owe them a quote. Not today. 2 blocks down, Trina was already at our usual table, a small corner cafe tucked under a canopy of ivy and tangled fairy lights. She had a ceramic mug in her hands and a look that said she wouldn't push, but she'd still ask. "Well," she said as I sat, "do you regret it?" I stirred the cream into my coffee slowly, letting the question settle. "I regret thinking I needed their permission to matter," I said. "That's all." She nodded. "That's not small." "No," I said. "It's not." Later that afternoon, I let myself into the co-working space we'd just finished painting the week before. Nothing fancy, just hardwood floors, old windows that stuck in summer, secondhand chairs, and a fridge that hummed louder than it should. But it was ours. 3 of us had built it. Women who'd all been cut out, talked over, made invisible in rooms we helped construct. My corner faced the light. No nameplate. Just a desk, a corkboard with pinned notes, and a chair. Dad's chair. I had cleaned it, polished the pine smooth again, and fastened a small metal plaque to the back. It read, "To the one who stayed silent, then spoke the loudest." I didn't cry when I saw it. I just sat. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was earned. That night at home, I opened my laptop one last time. My inbox was quieter now. Fewer legal notices, fewer forwarded gossip threads. Just one message from Trina, a subject line with no punctuation. "If they ever ask again." I clicked reply. Tell them I've already said all I needed to. Then I closed the tab. As I reached to set my phone on silent, a notification slid across the screen. New message. Everglen Capital. "Hi, Lauren. If you're launching something again, we're in." I didn't answer. Not yet. I leaned back, let the room darken around me, and breathed. Stillness isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of peace. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt real. Sitting at my new desk, sunlight pooling across the old wood of my father's chair, I finally felt no need to prove anything. It wasn't about winning a lawsuit or reclaiming a title. It was about remembering that I was there all along, building something real, even when no one clapped. Sometimes, what we survive quietly speaks louder than what others shout. Family should be the place where truth is honored, not rewritten, and worth should never be measured by applause alone. If this story touched something familiar in your own life, I invite you to share your thoughts. Somewhere out there, someone might be waiting to feel seen too.